I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
John, this is our 67th episode. John and I are both clinical psychologists. We've been hosting this podcast for 67 episodes because we became very concerned by what we saw, not in direct examination, but what we saw from video and from public appearances that Donald Trump is suffering from the early signs of dementia. We've been cataloging those signs. They're both linguistic and physical. And for a long time, and John really was the person who spearheaded the Duty to Warn movement in 2017, talking about Donald Trump's severe narcissistic personality disorder, which prevents him from being able to have empathy for others, prevents him from internalizing a moral code. It accounts for his criminal behavior, his out of control lying, which at this point now in his development or a decline is become completely unchecked, and his wish for power and domination of everyone and everything. We are seeing it. It's an insatiable desire he has to use leverage and extortion over other countries, over institutions within the government, within the culture. There's no part of the government or the culture that Trump is not trying to gain control of. And we've been watching this, and we're alarmed, and we've been inviting our viewers to pay attention. Right, John?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's almost like they're leaving no institution unturned. You know, we don't even have time, right, to follow all of the different institutions. You know, I mean, like when he was taking over the Kennedy Center, it's like, what, the Kennedy Center? You know, but that was sort of an example. Do you know what I mean? Of he's not leaving any institutions unscathed. They're being pretty systematic about trying to infiltrate or destroy or corrupt virtually any institution you could name,
including renaming the Department of Defense, which since when can he do that? That's got to be decided by Congress, but he just did it, and everyone's saying, okay.
Right. You know what I think sort of interesting about that, though? We didn't have a chance to put it in the show, but I'm glad you mentioned it. It really says something about his malignant narcissism, right? Because defense, right, that seems weak, right? He wants to be on offense, right? He wants to be pounding and bombing and killing and hurting other people. He loves war. Okay. He wants to be the king of war.
Right. While jonesing for a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. No, it's really. But you know, one thing I just want to say before we continue, you know, about Congress not stopping him from renaming a department that I think employs more people than small countries. It's huge. The Pentagon, run by Pete Hegseth. I remember when I was in high school, I was walking to school and I watched this kind of tough kid on the corner shaking down kids for their lunch money. This guy had so much confidence. He'd come over here. He's, give me what you have. Hey, you wait there. People were just not in line, and we're giving him their money. There's something about the bully, the aggressive person. It's almost hypnotic. It's like, okay, well, I guess you want my lunch money? Here it is. Congress is doing exactly the same thing. Oh, you want to call Department of War? Okay. You want to take away our right to do all this stuff? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, later in the show, we're going to be talking about how the Supreme Court is taking away our rights. And in that regard, what a discouraging week this was. But, you know, there's so much bad news to get to. We'll get to that later.
So where do you want to start, John?
Well, we always want to update people on what kind of coverage the media is giving Donald Trump's dementia. So again, we have found that there are some publications in the UK and in Ireland that are covering it. And when we have seen it covered in America, it's actually news services like Apple and MSN that pick up these articles from the UK. So what's interesting, though, is that there's a couple of publications that seem to be following shrinking Trump. And on one hand, I'm proud of that. And you could say we're showing off or congratulating ourselves. On the other hand, I actually find it discouraging that, when they come looking for the people who have been defaming Trump, there's just going to be the two of us. It's like those comedies when they say, can we have a volunteer for the suicide mission? And 98 people, step back, leaving the
leaving you and me standing there
Laurel and Hardy kind of standing there.
It's another fine mess you've got me into.
Exactly. But let's look at what they're saying. So the Irish Star says Donald Trump is facing an, quote, onslaught of dementia, as psychologists warn, quote, all he does is deteriorate, end quote. Clinical psychologists Dr. Harry Segal and Dr. John Gartner have sounded the alarm over Donald Trump's cognitive ability as they claim, quote, all he does is deteriorate. Oh, and look, there's a picture of us and a still from a screenshot from Shrinking Trump. In a recent preview of their Shrinking Trump show, you see, I think I figured it out, Harry. I don't think they're actually watching our whole show. As some of you may know, we always do a little mini show for Midas Touch. It's about 15 minutes. So I think, Harry, they're actually watching the Midas Touch version. The psychologists examined what they refer to as the, quote, onslaught of dementia that Trump is facing. On this week's show, we take a closer look at the ways in which Donald Trump's cognitive functioning appears to be slipping even more, Dr. Segal said. Quote, as we have said so often in this program, the onset of dementia doesn't stop. It just continues, he added. Dr. Gartner agreed, claiming that the president is currently the best he's ever going to be.
I wish they were quoting other people. I wish more people would talk about it.
Exactly. It's
Michael Wolff has a podcast he just began called Inside Trump's Head, which he claims to be doing a psychological expose. I'm not sure that's exactly what he's doing, but I do like it. I wanted to do a shout out to Michael on this one. But the next one. The next one's from the Daily Express in England. Is that right?
That's correct. Donald Trump's mental collapse is being fueled by two key factors, psychologists claim. Again, in the subheadline, clinical psychologist Dr. Harry Segal has been analyzing Donald Trump's behavior and has claimed that the president is suffering from incipient dementia. Now, unfortunately, I think, Harry, they picked a kind of unfortunate screenshot of you. You do look a little goofy there, but it does say warning taken without permission. The picture was taken without your permission. The psychologist concluded, we know that he's losing ground terribly. We know that he's losing ground cognitively. There's a kind of race to see, does he lose power before he becomes cognitively disorganized?
Well, I'm still handsome in that picture as far as I can.
They can't take that away from you.
They can't take that away from me. No, seriously, it was a funny thing, though, because last week John was on assignment and Ahmed Baba sat in for John, and he was terrific. But it looks like I think the Express just watched that episode, which is why I'm the only psychologist mentioned. So I think they're starting to watch the show and then just take clips of it and just use it as news.
Just kind of lazy reporting, actually. The truth is they just watch a 15-minute clip and then they get an article.
Well, there's such a hunger for media, right?
No, but it's important. But it's important that they're keeping it in the public consciousness. So you mentioned the fact that. Go ahead.
I'm saying, John. Go ahead. You go.
Well, you mentioned that they had Ahmed Baba was the co-host, and he did do a very good job. But I just wanted to mention that while I was on assignment, I podcasted with some other co-hosts. So I just wanted you to know that. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Hope you realize that.
I'm very threatened. And I want to know who it is that you podcasted with. I want to know who it is. I want to know the details of it and how it started.
Yeah, these poly podcast relationships are a lot more complicated than they look, people.
Listen, just to make one more point about this, it's nice that people are some journalists are watching the show and are reporting on what we're saying, but there should be so many more people talking about this.
I know.
It's very discouraging. I mean,
yeah.
You and I just keep at it. And there are some other psychologists, but I don't see them getting any kind of attention. And I don't see anyone on the major news networks talking about it. They just aren't. They stay as far away from it as possible. So anyway, this is our lone project.
Okay. Well, so I wanted to report a little bit on Trump's adventure at the U.S. Open. Apparently, it took people hours to get in because of the security. But here's the reaction that he got from the New York crowd. I'm only going to show one clip. I actually had 4 because I get so much pleasure out of it, but I just picked one.
Dictator! Liar! Dictator! Liar! Dictator!
Just another episode of Everybody Hates Donnie. But more to the point, so I just want you to visualize the scene. So imagine, Harry, that you're at the finals of the U.S. Open, a riveting performance, right? And you're the center of attention. People are booing you. Maybe some are cheering you, right? But you're getting a reaction of the whole crowd, right? So how does Trump react? Oh, he's asleep again, just like he slept through most of the days of his criminal trial. I just want to point out this isn't normal. Okay. Although it is normal for people who have dementia, because involuntarily falling asleep at, inappropriate times is typical of dementia. Now, look, I'm an older person. I fall asleep sometimes, when the family's around in the evening or after having a beer or whatever. But you're at the U.S. Open finals and thousands of people are looking at you, just like if you're in a criminal trial and you're in the dock. That's not a place where people fall asleep. And I just want to point this out because now we're focusing more on Trump's physiology, right? We've learned about his swollen ankles and his, the intravenous, the failure of his. They're not saying it's a heart failure, but they're saying it's a failure of his veins, right? To what was the name of the? I'm blocking on the name of the condition. I'm sorry.
I can't remember
IV something.
Because it's not true.
It's not true, because they're obviously hiding the more serious problem. They're lying about the bruises on his hands, which are he's probably getting some kind of IV fluid. Some people are.
No, it's just shaking hands, John. It's because he shakes hands a lot.
Yeah,
what's wrong with you?
But not with both hands. But he's got the bruises on both hands, not only on the shaking it, right? Because they're liars. But let me also show you then again. So this is from the 9/11 memorial. So we're actually taping this on Thursday. So this is actually on 9/11. This is him today at the 9/11 memorial. And let's hear what our friend David Pakman has to say about it.
What on earth is going on with Donald Trump's face? At a 9/11 commemoration event today in Arlington, Virginia, Donald Trump not only fell asleep. That's not really news anymore. Trump is out of energy and falling asleep regularly at public events, but his face melted into a lopsided, droopy mess. Is this the sign of vigor? Is this the energy that Trump told us Joe Biden lacked and that he would bring? And by the way, is this respectful to the victims whose lives were being commemorated here? This is yet another humiliation, and the humiliations just won't stop coming, one after another.
For those of you who are just listening, Harry did a funny imitation of someone with a facial droop, clearly inappropriately making fun of the handicap, but that's the kind of people we are here.
No, it's actually really disturbing. I
It
hadn't
is
seen
disturbing. You hadn't seen that, and significant, and that's why I'm showing it, not
it.
just to make fun of him or to joke. Yes, as David Pakman says, once again, it's inappropriate that he's falling asleep. Although, in that context, to be honest, I could understand it a little bit better because they were naming each name of people. But that droop, some people are speculating, and it is speculation. We don't have hard evidence, but that some people are speculating, and this would be consistent with his circulatory problems, that he's having mini strokes.
Right.
And when you see someone with half their face drooping like that, that's not just someone being tired. That's not a normal face when people are tired or fatigued or falling asleep or asleep. Your face, one half of your face doesn't droop like that. It's suggesting something more serious.
We won't know, of course, because there's no transparency. There's no reporting on his health. But I want to repeat something I said a few weeks ago, that a very astute lawyer that I know who follows politics, he said he really thought that that Trump will either die in office or will be removed because of progressive illness. I mean, between what looks like to us as early signs of dementia, then heart failure. I mean, congestive heart failure is what typically causes swelling, largely swollen ankles. I think he's not. I mean, he's not doing well. He just isn't.
I'm predicting, Harry, that he'll die in office and not be removed. It'll be my weekend at Donnie's White House.
Yeah,
right.
I knew you were going to say that. All right, so all right, we're going now
we move on to Jeffrey Epstein.
To the Epstein files. I've heard people saying that Trump is such a genius at moving things along, and but he really can't get this story to shake. He really can't. He's tried every way he can. He's called it a hoax. He's dismissed it. He didn't meet with the women who had gathered outside the Congress. You know how easy that would have been just to meet with them? Of course, it's problematic if he actually had abused them.
Right. Oh, good to see you again.
So I thought we should first of all take a look at the birthday card, shall we? The famous one. All right. So I just want to describe this to those of you who haven't seen it. This is a birthday card that ostensibly and almost certainly Donald Trump sent to Jeffrey Epstein for his birthday, for his 50th birthday. And there's the outline of a torso of a woman's body with two sort of shallow curves for breasts, and then Donald's signature saying Donald looks like in the place where pubic hair would be. But what I find really fascinating about this is the fact that if Donald Trump wrote this, and I believe he did, it's a very interesting and creative act. And remember, this is when Trump was doing television. So he writes it as though it's a dialogue of a television program with a voiceover. There need be more, there must be more to life than having everything. So Trump wrote that as a voiceover, and then he has a dialogue between him and Jeffrey, and he writes it as Donald. So Donald, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. So here's Donald saying,
wink. Nod,
he
nod.
has everything in the world, and there must be more than having everything, but I won't tell you what it is to have more than everything. And Jeffrey, Trump has Jeffrey say, nor will I share what I also, nor will I, since I also know what it is. So now Jeffrey is saying, I know what it is to have more than everything. And then Donald says, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. And Jeffrey says, yes, we do, come to think of it. And Donald writes, Enigmas never age. Have you noticed that, Jeffrey? As a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time that I saw you. So Donald has Jeffrey saying that Donald
Mhm.
looks going to live forever and doesn't look old. Remember, they're both 50. And Donald says, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday. And may every day be another wonderful secret. Now, I think that's a really original and rather brilliant little dialogue that he wrote. It's brilliant that it's imaginative. The dialogue works well. It's a great little bit, but the content is malevolent and utterly narcissistic. We have everything and more, and
Right.
we're going to live forever, which is the narcissist's greatest wish, right? I will live forever. I'll always be powerful. And then at the end, may every birthday bring secrets.
So, and there, and what's there's so many things about this card that are revolting and revealing, right? And I'm glad you read the dialogue. And yes, the dialogue is clever because, after all, Donald Trump used to not have dementia.
Exactly.
Just to remind people, okay, he used to actually have a functioning brain. He could be clever, in stuff, but also the callousness and the casualness, right, of joking about pedophilia, of joking about abusing underage girls as if it's so funny, ha ha, wink, wink, nod, nod. It's utterly revolting. And as you and I were talking when we were looking at the drawing the other day, the breasts are very small. Again, to sort of suggest a pubescent girl.
Right. It's not a drawing of a mature woman, let's say, with full breasts. There's just these little lines, which really says everything, doesn't it?
And the thing is, if we were still living on Earth 1, where reality counts, this would count as what we call a smoking gun. Right. I mean, in his own hand, right? He's going, I really enjoyed what we did last night. We keep our secrets, right? And a little picture of it. I mean, it's all there. Plus, we know the context of his friendship with him and all the parties they went to together. They had one with models where it was just the two of them, and he's been to the island. And there's so much background. One of the comedians said, well, there's no context for this. And then he goes on to name like 20 different points of contact we already know about between, Trump and Epstein. But unfortunately, now that we're living on Earth 2, somehow that smoking gun isn't enough. I'm telling you, Harry, if that PP tape ever emerges, it won't matter. It won't matter.
It won't matter. Look, there's two things, and John's referring to the alleged tape of Trump having prostitutes urinate on the bed where Obama and Michelle had slept in a Moscow hotel room. Listen, he won't oppose Putin. He just won't. He says he's going to. He's now letting Putin do anything he wants. So we know there's leverage over him.
Mm-hmm.
And he will not release the Epstein stuff. He won't engage it. He won't meet with the victims. He won't do anything. So there's clearly something he doesn't want us to know.
And the other thing that I find so funny is, we know he's such a ridiculously shameless, pathological liar. That's not news. But I do just want to, for amusement's sake, go over all the ways he has lied about this drawing, right, to try to throw off the scent. So the first thing that he's saying, right, is that it's not his signature. Okay, he happens to have one of the most distinctive signatures, right, that I know of. So it's so much his signature, but this became an issue. So here's a New York Times article about his signature on the drawing. Trump says it's not his signature, but personal letters look similar. Donald Trump's signature has evolved over the years, but when signing just his first name, he often includes the same flourish at the end. Now, this is my favorite part. For those of you who are just listening, they give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 examples of Donald Trump's signature, including the drawing for Epstein. And I would challenge anyone to distinguish between any of these signatures. They're virtually identical. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. So for those of you who are just listening, I'm just telling you what we're seeing, which is that this is identical to all of his other signatures.
And the Times headline is, of course, backed by they look similar. They don't look similar. They look identical.
Right. Good
Obviously,
point.
This is clearly his signature.
So that gambit didn't work. But Harry, I don't know if you knew this, but actually, all along, Trump was actually working undercover to bring Jeffrey Epstein down.
And you know who said it the first time to let everyone know? Little Mikey Johnson. Listen to this.
He's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. The president knows and has great sympathy for the women who have suffered these unspeakable harms. It's detestable to him.
So you see, Harry, he had to participate in all of these heinous, immoral, illegal sex acts, because otherwise, how could he have, been part of the process to bring Epstein down? He didn't want to do it, but when you're an FBI informant, you got to go along with the gang.
And then Mike Johnson, we're not going to show you, but he walked it back because
yes,
he was confronted, and the fact was Trump was not an FBI.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, right. He kind of made it up. Now, Michael Wolff, the aforementioned Michael Wolff, who has this new podcast called Inside Trump's Head, he had a really nice Instagram reel, or whatever, I think they're called reels, about this very issue, which I think you might find interesting.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has offered a wacky new defense of Trump's long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Trump was an FBI informer helping to bring Epstein down. This is obviously ridiculous and a desperation move on the part of the White House, if not Trump himself. But the thing about Trump's whoppers is that they often contain a grain of truth and are also, at least in this instance, a window into the roots of conspiracy thinking. But in this case, I can actually tell you the real story. In 2004, Epstein bid on a piece of property in Palm Beach. He bid $36 million. He brought his friend Trump with him to look at the house and advise him on moving the swimming pool. Trump went around his back and bid $41 million, actually, for the house. Epstein knew Trump didn't have $41 million, and he suspected that Trump was fronting for someone, in this case, a man by the name of Dmitry Rybolev, a Russian oligarch. And in fact, within 24 months, Rybolev bought the house from Trump for $95 million, kind of a red flag of money laundering. Epstein, furious with his friend, furious over the top, threatened to reveal that Trump was a money launderer. Trump, tit for tat, went to the Palm Beach police and said Epstein was running a whorehouse. There is no honor, no less virtue among thieves. Trump was merely protecting himself.
I hate that when your underage sex trafficking and your Russian money laundering get, in opposition to each other. I hate it when that happens.
Me too. It happens to me all the time. But no, but notice that the story is really about Trump betraying Epstein.
Right.
I mean, it begins with the betrayal of a friend.
Right.
And Trump is
Well, he
known
loves
for-
to betray friends.
Yeah,
He
has
really
no
gets
loyalty.
pleasure out of it. It's a perverse aspect of the malignant narcissist in their sadism, and that they actually, as you've pointed out, he enjoys sleeping with his friends' wives if he can. Betrayal is actually not a bug for him; it's a feature.
FBI informant. Anyway, keep going. I'm just.
That's
Mike
like somebody
Johnson-
asked Mike Johnson,
Down-
did he wear a wire? Somebody asked him if he
Well,
wore a wire.
no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Because I'm just small and stupid, and I'm sorry.
But despite all this bullshit, and we all know that Leavitt, the press secretary, is just a total liar. But look at how she tries to spin, right? She's saying it's a hoax, but we have the documents, and then she's saying it's a forgery. I mean, just see how she baubles this ball.
You said the Epstein documents are a hoax that Democrats are perpetrating against the president. You've said he didn't sign that check, that he didn't sign the birthday card that he allegedly signed. So what is the theory, since these documents came from the Epstein estate? Who is I guess in your view, faking these documents?
I did not say the documents are a hoax. I said the entire narrative surrounding Jeffrey Epstein right now that is absorbing many of the liberal cable channels on television is a hoax that is being perpetuated by opportunistic Democrats like Ro Khanna and the others whom you saw on that press conference outside of Capitol Hill, who are trying to push this hoax against the President of the United States.
What exactly is the hoax? I'm just trying to understand what's fake. What's fake is not the documents.
The hoax is the Democrats pretending to care about victims of crime when they do not care about victims of crime, when they have done nothing to solve crimes, when they have done nothing to lock up child pedophiles and child rapists across the country, and when they are now using victims as political props to try and, again, smear the President of the United States and drag on this bad story about him. It is a distraction. The Democrats view this story as nothing more than an attempt to distract from the accomplishments and the achievements of this administration. And that is what we mean when we call it a hoax.
If he didn't sign these, if you said he didn't sign the birthday card, he didn't do this, he also didn't do the check, those were in documents from the estate. So what is the working theory as to why he's in them?
The president has one of the most famous signatures in the world, and he has for many, many years. You know that, Maggie, you've covered him for a long time, long before he assumed this office when he was a businessman in New York. The president did not write that letter. He did not sign those documents. He maintains that position, and that position will be argued in court by his lawyers. The president is very confident he is going to win this case.
So very confident he's going to win this case. Not his signature. It's someone who's imitating his signature because they knew 20 years later that he'd be running for president. I know you thought this tape might be unnecessary, but I love Representative Moskowitz. I want to show you what he had to say about the pretzel logic that Leavitt is trying to push here, about that. She's not saying the document is a hoax, right? The hoax is that Democrats care about crime. Okay, so talk about a distraction. Okay, and someone says, well, so did he sign the document? Well, no, that's the hoax. He didn't sign the document. He's got a very recognizable signature. But why would anyone even think 20 years ago to want to imitate a signature? Let's hear how Representative Moskowitz takes it apart.
So this morning, our close personal friend, Mr. Comer, said that he was not going to look into the letter or the doodle, the president's doodle. He's a decent doodler, by the way. So he wasn't going to look into whether the signature was a forgery, and I'm concerned about that. Because this is the president of the United States. If there are forgeries or forgers out there, I think we should investigate it. And in fact, this document is 22 years old. So you're telling me someone 22 years ago went back to the future and forged his signature when he was a Democrat. And somehow this person was Nostradamus, knew he would become a Republican, become president 22 years later. So listen, I submit to you that we can solve this problem for the American people. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take our dear personal friend, Mr. Comer's word for it. Let's bring in a signature expert. You guys pick the witnesses. Bring in your signature experts, swear them under oath, and let's have the signature examined. Is it his or it is not his? We don't have to play games or The president says it's not his, we say it's him. No, let's bring in a signature expert, a referee, because we can't agree on anything, even when it's right in our face, of whether that is indeed the president's signature, or if it's a forgery, we should immediately open up an investigation into this forgery.
I think that was hilarious. And also, if someone's forging the signature of the president, we need a criminal event. We got to get to the bottom of that. Especially if it was some Nostradamus who knew 22 years ago that a Democratic businessman was going to become a Republican president.
Our guest today is Andy Borowitz, and I think in a recent post he talked about how Hunter Biden went back in time to forge Trump's signature. No, Moskowitz is wonderful. We're very lucky to have him in Congress.
I don't know if you could heard it, but the person next to him was cracking up while he was talking about the Nostradamus because it was so funny. Some people may know about this, but there's a lot more in that birthday book, and it's all repulsive. And it again, really is so revealing about Trump's psychology and abusive, horrendous, monstrous attitudes towards women and towards girls. I want to show this picture that some of you may have seen it about the check that allegedly is being written by Jeffrey Epstein to sell Donald Trump a depreciated woman. Okay, which is another thing, a used woman, and they've taken her out of the picture, but there was, and they've withheld her name, but there was a 20-year-old model from, I forget what country she was from, that they had both slept with. And so this depreciated woman check is a joke, and a reference, in quotes, for those of you who are listening, and a reference to that.
So in the photo, we see Jeffrey Epstein standing with a man and also a woman whose face is blocked out, and they're holding a check that says to Jeffrey Epstein $22,500, and signed by Trump. And the friend from Mar-a-Lago who put this in Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book writes, "Jeffrey, showing early talents with money and women, ! Sells fully depreciated blank, the name of the woman, to Donald Trump for $22,500. Shower early, people skills too. Even though I handled the deal, I didn't get any of the money or the girl! !
It's so not funny. They're talking about trafficking. They're talking about slavery. They're talking about women being bought and sold.
Yeah, it's sort of a Borscht Belt gag from hell. I mean, it's just it's stupid, it's hideous, and it's evidence.
And it all fits together. And there's really only one way that it all fits together. As long as we're talking about disgusting attitudes towards women, I just felt I needed to get in there one more tape that this is from this week. So Donald Trump is claiming that he's brought crime down in Washington, D.C., 100%. That it's been alleged that it was he's brought down crime 70%, but no, he's brought it down 100%. But then he says, of course, I'm not including, things that happen in the home, right? Domestic violence, because I guess the National Guard really can't do a lot about that, right? But listen to how he so casually dismisses the serious issue of domestic violence.
There's no crime. They said crime's down 87%. I said, no, it's more than 87%. Virtually nothing. And much lesser things that take place in the home they call crime. They'll do anything they can to find something. If a man has a little fight with the wife, they say this was a crime, see? So now I can't claim 100%.
And this is from someone who has physically abused his wife, by the way. And that's documented in his first wife's biography, autobiography, memoir. It's just disgusting. A little fight with the wife. I mean, the anti-woman.
John. So a little fight with the wife, they got in the way of his 100% statistic.
Right. So he can't narcissistically claim to have solved all crime. Well, as discouraging as all that is, what I really found...
There's more.
There's more. Right. Now, how much do you want to kill yourself? No. I call this the Klan rides again, because the Supreme Court has truly opened the door to masked men disappearing people purely on the basis of their race or their accent or where they work. So we've seen this dynamic before, right? The lower court judges make a very sensible ruling in placing some limits on Trump's illegal behavior. The circuit court supports them, and then the Supreme Court, in an unsigned order, just waves it away. So we're talking about the Fourth Amendment here, which is it goes all the way back really to English law, right? That we should not be subject to search and seizure unless there's probable cause. You can't just stop someone on the street and search them or abduct them or arrest them unless you have a good reason.
Right.
And I mean, this is so basic, right? This is so basic. So I just wanted to run quickly through what the judge said, what the circuit court said, what Kavanaugh said, and what Sotomayor said. So first, let's see what the district judge said. He said, defendants, that meaning the government, may not rely solely on the factors below alone or in combination to form reasonable suspicion. Number one, apparent race or ethnicity. Number two, speaking Spanish or speaking English with an accent. Number three, presence at a particular location. Or number four, the type of work one does. And here the appeals court not only agrees with the judge, but adds here, defendants, again the government, have not shown that they are likely to suffer irreparable injury without a stay. It's really the opposite. The future injuries from which plaintiffs seek to be protected are violations of their constitutional rights. Quote, when an alleged deprivation of a constitutional right is involved, most courts hold that no further showing of irreparable injury is necessary. In other words, it's not the government that is potentially suffering irreparable harm because they can't just arbitrarily arrest people for their race. It's the people who are being arrested who have the chance to suffer irreparable harm, right? Because their rights are being violated. And what they're saying is, look, on Earth One, when we have actual constitutional law, if someone can show, look, there's a high probability that someone's constitutional rights will be violated if this practice is enacted, that's it. That's a totally grounds for putting a stay on it, right? That's where the irreparable harm would take place. So the logical thing is put a hold on that behavior because it potentially violates the constitutional rights of a large group of people, and let's examine it first, okay? But of course, our corrupt Supreme Court did the opposite. They removed the stay on this grossly unconstitutional behavior. And here is Justice Kavanaugh's, and by the way, it was in an unsigned order. So it's the arrogance of this. It's like they're just kind of waving their hands and saying, oh, there's another right from the Bill of Rights gone, Fourth Amendment, gone, just with a wave of their hand. Don't ask me why. It's because I said so. I mean, the arrogance is just absolutely outrageous. But the one person who provided some rationale was Justice Kavanaugh. And let's hear what he had to say. To stop an individual for brief questioning about immigration status, the government must have reasonable suspicion that the individual is illegally present in the United States. Whether an officer has reasonable suspicion depends on the totality of the circumstances. To be clear, apparent ethnicity alone cannot furnish reasonable suspicion. Under this court's case law regarding immigration stops, however, it can be a relevant factor when considered along with other salient factors. Under this court's precedents, not to mention common sense, these circumstances taken together can constitute at least reasonable suspicion of illegal presence. So, Harry, the criteria is the totality of the circumstances, which means absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
Right? What does that mean, the totality of the circumstances? What it means is they can do whatever the heck they want. It means that if they think that this person might be an illegal immigrant because because of the totality of the circumstances they've processed in their mind, okay, that then they can beat them to the ground, handcuff them, and kidnap them, and disappear them. It's insane. And also, these people aren't being briefly detained; they're being beaten to the ground and kidnapped, and sometimes disappeared for long periods of time where no one knows where they are. So it's just so hypocritical. But let's hear what Sotomayor has to say, because she is really sounding the alarm. We should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job. And another quote from her is, countless people in the Los Angeles area have been grabbed, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed simply because of their looks, their accents, and the fact that they make a living doing manual labor. Today, the court needlessly subjects countless more to these exact same indignities.
I never thought I'd live to see the day the Supreme Court would sanction pulling people over because of their skin color or because of their accent. It's a sad day. I mean, this is one of those weeks where I felt very discouraged because it just feels like we're just slipping so quickly into autocracy. The Fourth Amendment, Schmorth Amendment, it's that's gone. And it has very practical applications to what is happening in the news right now. Right, he is now threatening to essentially invade Chicago, as he's invaded L.A. and D.C. And we know that Governor Pritzker, who we're going to show a piece of tape from in a minute, has resisted this with everything he has and in every way he can. But again, revealing the sick sadism of Donald Trump, I want to show you a post that he posted on social media about Chicago. Now, for those of you who are just watching, it says Chicago instead of apocalypse now. It says Chicago ellipse now. It's a picture of Donald Trump looking like the character who shoot, I'm blocking on the name of the actor who said, "I love napalm. I love the smell of napalm in the morning." It's funny because I've been quoting that quote for a long time to describe Donald Trump's sadistic, malignant narcissism, the idea that he gets pleasure from destruction. So not only does he say, so what Donald Trump posted with this picture of him looking like that character, Robert Duvall, right? I think that's the person who said it. Okay, thank you. He says, "I love the smell of deportations in the morning." In other words, really taking sadistic pleasure in the destructive and despicable and harmful and unfair behavior towards these good people. And then underneath that, he says, Chicago's about to find out why it's called the Department of War. So he's saying it. He's saying it. I'm declaring war on the city of Chicago. I'm going to level them with, like we did with Vietnam with napalm. He says whatever he wants, and it's everywhere, and it's about absolutely everything. You have more on this, though, don't you?
Yeah. Well, so a very well-respected senior White House correspondent, Yamiche Alcindor, asked him about this post and see how abusive he was towards her in response.
That's fake news. When you say that, darling, that's fake news.
Well, why would
I
you
don't
the
go to
Department
war.
of Defense?
Listen, be quiet. Listen. You don't listen. You never listen. That's why you're second rate. We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
Now, this is a senior White House correspondent who happens to be a black woman.
Yeah,
And he's saying you're
Senator.
second rate. Shut up. That's why you know you're no good, or you're second. It's so devaluing, and we know that there's a pattern. He does this to black women and to black people
always.
and women in general.
Oh, sure. No. I mean, he's an utter racist. But when John and I were looking at this over the past few days, I just looked at it and thought, God, if you don't read anything and you don't think very much and you have to close your eyes, he's doing something rather brilliant. Wait, what do you mean war? We're just going to end. We just want the murderers. That's all. We're just going to end crime. How could you be against that? It's basically what he said.
Right. Except he's the one that said he's going to war. It's from his social media post.
And he's the one threatening the National Guard. He's the one going against the without permission of the governor or the mayor of Chicago. So, it's posturing and of the worst kind. But it's only one of many things he's doing every day.
I know. And by the way, just to add an element of sadism and perversion to the whole thing, there's always more. It can always get more perverse. Here's what Pritzker has to say about the fact that he happens to be timing these raids in Chicago for Mexican American Day.
We have reason to believe that Stephen Miller chose the month of September to come to Chicago because of celebrations around Mexican Independence Day that happen here every year. It breaks my heart to report that we have been told ICE will try and disrupt community picnics and peaceful parades. Let's be clear, the terror and cruelty is the point, not the safety of anyone living here.
The terror and cruelty is the point. The Klan is riding again, except they're riding U.S. government-issued Jeeps, okay? People in masks are attacking minority communities when they're having peaceful celebrations, peaceful parades, right? And disrupting them and terrorizing them, right? I mean, this reminds me of that Texas town that, was black Texas town that was attacked in the 1920s. I mean, they're just declaring war on a civilian population on the basis of their race.
No, it is. It's
So this is what we've come to, that the U.S. government has become the Ku Klux Klan, sicking their secret police on communities just because they're minorities. And
yeah, keep going.
You're speechless. No, I mean it deserves speechlessness, and it gets worse because it always gets worse. The other thing we wanted to talk about was the murder at sea, right? That he blew up at a boat off the coast of South America that allegedly had drugs, that was allegedly heading for the United States. We actually don't know if either of those things are true, but also this isn't how we conduct law enforcement. If someone is trying to smuggle drugs on a boat into the United States, we arrest them. We don't murder them on suspicion of committing a crime, unless you're living in a sick authoritarian state. So I just want to point out that this is another crucial step in the authoritarian creep. We are now justifying extrajudicial murders, extrajudicial killing. Okay. Like, whatever, that guy from the Philippines, you have to throw drug dealers out of helicopters. Harry, you had a tape from Ryan Goodman that you wanted to show about.
Yeah, just a brief. Ryan Goodman is a law professor at NYU and also worked in the government in the Defense Department. And he's just very, very eloquent about this stuff. And here he is with Bill Kristol. And just to reinforce what John's saying, this is yet another area. And what we were told is that Trump was told about the ship and said, just blow it up. Just kill them. So here's Ryan Goodman.
So we talk about the law a lot. I talk about the law day in, day out. And I'm definitely going to say, bottom line up front, this is patently illegal. But just, it's one of those moments in which knowing what seems to have happened here is just murder. I mean, murder, even if one never picked up a legal dictionary, it seems like it's murder. And it seems like it's murder, and then just to drill down, in the very way in which the Defense Department would define murder, based on the Defense Department's pretty narrow but well-settled views of international law. So under international law, under any scenario, it's hard for me to think how the lawyers could have signed off on that. And that's part of that's one of my questions, like who signed off on this? Because basically, either take the White House's attempt, it seems, to put the framework of this around war, that we're in an armed conflict of some sort. In an armed conflict, you can't kill civilians. You can't kill people who are just transporting drugs. And it would be murder under international law, Geneva Conventions, and U.S. War Crimes Act, and Article 118 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. In the best case scenario for them, assuming we're in an armed conflict. And if we're not in an armed conflict, then you've still got murder under U.S. federal felony law, and you've got murder in the way the Defense Department acknowledges applies to extraterritorial U.S. military actions under international human rights law and the foreign restatement under U.S. law, or interpretations of it through the United States' lens. So this is such a gigantic change. And I'd put it this way as well, having worked in the Defense Department, having worked on law of war issues for decades now, I've never seen the Defense Department have a policy action of killing civilians. Like that's what we're talking about today. And that's why, yes, there's the legalities of it, and it's easy to make the legal argument because I can't think of what I always try to articulate what the strongest argument is on the other side. I don't know it. I don't know how they could even come to the conclusion that this was legal.
You know, Rachel Maddow had a clip that I wanted to use, but we have too many, as we always do, where she basically went on to describe how all the people who have been fired from the Department of Defense and the national security space. And so all the lawyers, all the JAGs, all the inspector generals, all the admirals, all the assistant admirals. In other words, they're wiping out all the people who support the military culture, right? Which would know that that was murder, which would know that that was an illegal order, right? But if you get rid of all those people with that institutional knowledge, then sure, you'll get someone who's going to be willing to blow up the ship. And again, this is part of Trump's strategy, right? To hollow out institutions so they'll do his will, and not to scare people too much. But I know, Jason Stanley, the author who we had on here, who has since fled the United States, said, you know, you're not safe if you spend time rehearsing in your mind why you're safe. So some of us may be watching or listening to this program and go, well, you know, I'm a native born white person, middle class, whatever. That's not going to apply to me. You know, ICE isn't going to knock me, isn't going to disappear me. Extrajudicial killing isn't going to happen to me. But the point is, this is where it starts, right? They're persecuting the people they can, right? They're murdering the people they can, okay? And once that bar is cleared, once that's normalized, does anybody naive enough to think they're going to stop there?
Well, it's kind of like thinking that Putin's going to stop with Ukraine.
Right.
I mean, Poland just shot down drones that Putin put over their airspace. See, it's already starting. Now that he's been encouraged by Trump to keep on bombing and murdering people in Ukraine, Putin's going to start to slide over to Poland. Trump is going to keep undermining our liberty. Will keep undermining institutions, from law firms to the universities, to the Justice Department, to the intelligence, to business, to international relations. He's doing it everywhere. It's the consistent thing. He's the extortionist in chief. And that's what he does.
Don't you remember that children's book, If You Give a Malignant Narcissist a Cookie? Then they'll want to take Poland.
Yeah. I love that series. If You Give a Moose a Muffin is my favorite of the three of them. All right. We're filming this on Thursday, September 11th. And yesterday, Charlie Kirk was murdered at a university in Utah. And it's a really horrific murder. It's an assassination in front of 3,000 students. His children, his wife were there. And I've been really horrified by it. I'm horrified by all political violence. I don't think I agree with a word that guy ever said, but the idea that he would be murdered that way in cold blood, and obviously by someone who wasn't just sort of psychotic and disorganized and kind of stabbed him, but someone who managed to get away and not want to be caught or shot, which is often the case with these kinds of murderers or attempted murderers. But I'm also very worried about the use that this murder will be put to for those, particularly in power, will use it in order to bolster the taking away of liberty and the justification of violence and political and legal attacks on his enemies, if you know who I mean.
Yeah, no, I'm worried about the same thing, that this is going to trigger a series of back and forths where there's going to be people on the right who have most of the guns, who are now going to feel like some payback is required, that we're going to be seeing political violence on both sides. That this is, look, Donald Trump is trying to start a civil war. And he's trying to start a civil war that he knows he can win because he's got the most powerful military in the history of the human race to enforce it. So in all these ways, he's trying to provoke a reaction or escalate the political violence. And so what's sad is the murder itself is horrific and horrifying, but it's also its consequences are going to be to escalate the level of political violence. I've been saying from the beginning, there's gonna be blood in the streets. There's gonna be blood in the streets, folks. And this is just the beginning of it. And when you look at Donald Trump's reaction, right, when there's been mass shootings, it's always the role of the president, to try to calm things down, to denounce all political violence, and so we've got to come together, folks, to be against this. Someone showed us something on social media of Biden when he was responding to a shooting and a political shooting and talking about, all the things a commander-in-chief is supposed to say. That we've got to come together. We've got to be against this. This isn't who we are. Of course, that's not what Donald Trump did. What he did was use it as an excuse to escalate the tension and the violence.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country. From the attack on my life in Butler, Pennsylvania last year, which killed a husband and father, to the attacks on ICE agents, to the vicious murder of a healthcare executive in the streets of New York, to the shooting of House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and 3 others, radical left political violence has hurt too many innocent people and taken too many lives.
Doesn't mention.
So that's a call to action.
How about the two Democratic state senators in Minnesota who were gunned down in their house?
Right, exactly. He's only mentioning attacks against Republicans or right-wing politicians, going all the way back to Steve Scalise. And instead of denouncing political violence in general on both sides and mentioning examples on both sides, he's making it sound like enough of this radical left political violence. We're not going to take it anymore, right? Which is upping the temperature, which is pushing us towards more violent confrontation.
No, it doesn't mention Gabby Gifford. It doesn't mention anyone except making this look like a left-wing conspiracy to murder people and attacking ICE agents, which I have
never that one
seen,
in particular, right?
I've never seen documented.
I'm glad you mentioned that one. Yeah. Oh, the poor bullies. They're being the bullies are being bullied.
They're being doxxed.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, right. Wrong. They're not. That's all total bullshit. It's a lie.
Got to protect your secret police.
Yeah, those secret police, man, they're, it's destroying people's constitutional rights is a tough job, but someone's got to do it.
You know, by the way, who joined ICE? Dean Cain, the actor who played Superman like 20 years ago.
Really?
Joined, yeah.
I don't know if you watch South Park. I don't know if you watch South Park. A lot of the people, our viewers do, and they reference it. But in one of the episodes, the school counselor at the school loses his job because of funding cuts, and he doesn't know how he's going to support himself. So he joins ICE to get the $50,000 bonus.
Okay. All right, let's take a look at our last bit.
There's one more clip I just want to show. It's very quick. But
I'm sorry.
As someone who decries violence, right, public violence, let's see how he responded previously to a school shooting.
It's horrible to see that happening. That's just horrible. So surprising to see it here, but I'll have to get over it.
Well, just have to get over it.
Can't make much use of this politically, so let's just forget about it. I mean, let me wait till someone gets
your children were murdered. Stop your crying, you babies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's appalling. So you had wanted to show Ezra Klein wrote a very persuasive and highly quoted op-ed in the New York Times, but he also did a video version, and you wanted to show that. I think I'm very glad you're showing it, because I'll wait. I'm not going to give anything away, but I'm going to talk about the call to action that Ezra Klein is proposing here.
Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I've always found Ezra Klein to be inconsistent. Sometimes I think he nails stuff. Sometimes I just disagree with him. I don't think it's well argued. But man, when he is good, he's incredibly powerful. And not only did he write this remarkable op-ed, but the Times really did a beautiful production of his reading it, of interspersing it with clips. It's an 18-minute video. I have forwarded it to like 20 people I know. I hope you'll do the same. It's really remarkable. And what he's doing here is really talking about this moment in two ways. One, he's saying that the Democrats have an opportunity to shut down the government over renewing this terrible budget that was passed in March. And that a lot of people in the Democratic Party, both representatives and members, voters, were furious that Chuck Schumer had gone along with the Trump administration. Although Schumer had some decent arguments, which was, there are a number of them, but one of them was, it was so early in the process that if you shut down the government, it would have given more power to Trump to do more things as far as cutting the government, et cetera. A lot of those arguments don't hold anymore. So Klein talks about that decision and then makes an argument for why this time the Democrats need to shut down the government. And he puts it in the context of Trump's radical authoritarian takeover of the government. So we're going to show you two clips and we're going to talk about them. This is from the beginning in talking about what happened last March when the Democrats caved in on the budget.
In about 3 weeks, the government's funding will run out. Democrats will face a choice: join Republicans to fund a government that Trump is turning into a tool of authoritarian takeover and vengeance, or shut the government down. Democrats faced a version of this choice 6 months ago.
The chainsaw for bureaucracy.
We were in the full muzzle velocity stage of the presidency.
More mass firings in the U.S. government.
Froze federal funding on projects across the country.
He is taking retribution.
The law firms have to behave themselves.
Sweeping tariffs. But why Canada?
And Democrats at that moment seemed completely overwhelmed and outmatched.
We will win. We will win.
I kept hearing people say they lacked a message, but that's not what they lacked. What they lacked was power. They didn't have power. They didn't have the House or the Senate, but they did have one sliver of leverage. In order to fund the government, Senate Republicans needed Democratic votes, not just 1 or 2 votes. They needed at least 7 Democrats to reach that magic 60-vote threshold in the Senate.
All eyes are on Democrats and what they'll do.
House Democrats wanted a shutdown.
But now I can report that the Senate Democratic leader himself, Chuck Schumer, has told Democrats that he plans to vote yes.
And he encouraged a crucial number of his colleagues to do the same. The bill passed.
I appreciate Senator Schumer, and I think he did the right thing.
To many Democrats, this seemed completely insane.
I think it is a huge slap in the face, and I think that there's a wide sense of betrayal.
This was Democrats' first real opportunity to fight back against Donald Trump, and what had they done? They'd folded immediately. What were they good for?
I'm afraid that it may be time for the Senate Democrats to pick new leadership as we move forward.
During this period, this early schism in Democratic strategy, I was talking to people on all sides of it. Hakeem Jeffries' argument was that a shutdown creates a crisis. A crisis creates attention, and attention gives Democrats the chance to make their case to the American people. Schumer's argument was threefold. First, Trump was being stopped in the courts. There were dozens of cases playing out against him, and he was losing again and again and again. Shut down the government, and you might eventually shut down the courts, freeing him from that constraint. Second, DOJ was trying to gut the executive branch. When the government falls into a funding crisis, the executive gets more authority to decide where the money the government does have goes. In that chaos, DOJ could go farther and faster. Third, the market was already quaking at the threat of Trump's tariffs.
Trump is calling it a period of transition, many investors perhaps seeing something more concerning.
If Democrats triggered a shutdown at that exact moment, at the moment Trump was creating an economic crisis, they would confuse who is to blame for all the turbulence. It's the first rule of politics. When your opponent is drowning, don't throw them a lifeline.
And I think that's a really excellent summary about what happened. I remember I was in Europe at the time. We were doing the show remotely. And I remember first being furious at Schumer, and then I listened to these arguments. I remember thinking, we're going to give him more power.
There's a broader principle here, which is that it's better to fight than to surrender. With whatever tools you have. Unfortunately, as Ezra Klein points out, the Democrats really have very few levers of power. But this is one of the very, very few that they have. And, the Republicans have shut down the government a whole bunch of times and threatened to do it a whole bunch of times over ridiculous, silly, crazy stuff, right? But the point is that one thing that has helped them garner support is the fact that people saw them fighting, right? For what they believed in or for their side. Okay. And the thing that has continued to dog Democrats is our passivity, our weakness, our not using the power that we do have to stand up for the country and the Constitution and the values that we believe in. So I agree. Shutting down the government is a desperate move. But these are desperate times. These are the times when you throw your body in front of the tank treads, right? To stop the authoritarian takeover.
Yeah, but the Democrats couldn't make use of it. They had no message. They had no ideas. And although I'm furious at Schumer for doing it, I get the point then. And Klein is saying that on balance, he could understand that point of Schumer's in March. But now what Klein is saying is this is a completely different moment. That moment was what he called the muzzle velocity. You know, when you're cranking your shotgun, right? He's saying now this is the authoritarian takeover. It's not leading up to it. The courts have folded and supported him. The stock market has not crashed. The tariffs have not crashed the economy yet. So it's not the same moment as it was. It looked like Trump was going to crash and burn. Now it looks like he's going to take over the whole country. So Klein then goes on to make an argument for what the Democrats should do now when at the end of this month they have the opportunity to refuse to sign on to this spending bill. But I think what Klein is doing, and he's someone, as you point out, John, has worked on the Hill and has connections to the Democratic establishment. He's really making a case for them. Here's what you should do. Let's hear this. Oh, John, did you want to say something before we go?
I was just going to say he is very connected to the Democratic establishment. He used to work on the Hill. He founded Indivisible, afterwards. So they do listen to him. And the other thing I think is that, look, this is becoming an authoritarian takeover. Do you want to fund an authoritarian takeover? Right. That's the place to say, if the government is so corrupt that it's being turned against our own people, then we're not going to fund it. And the other thing is he's abrogated Congress's power over funding. He's saying, I don't care what you've allocated for. I'm not going to spend it on that. So why would you give more money who's refused to spend the money you've given them for the things you gave it to them for? So I think the Democrats do have a very clear message. The message is, we're not giving you another dime. If you don't spend the money we gave you the way we told you to spend it, that means start do foreign aid, honor the contracts and the grants for medical research, right? Pay up or starve. We're not giving you any more money given the way you're spending it.
No, John, I think you're anticipating Klein's argument, but let's just hear how he makes it. No, I like your thought. Let's hear how he makes his case.
I think the case for a shutdown is this. A shutdown is an intentional event. It's an effort to turn the diffuse crisis of Trump's corrupting the government into an acute crisis that the media, that the public will pay attention to. Right now, Democrats have no power, so no one cares what they have to say. A shutdown would make people listen. But then Democrats would have to actually win the argument. They would need to have an argument. In my head, the argument is something like this. Donald Trump won the election. He is the legitimate president. His government should be funded so long as it is acting the way the government is supposed to, serving the people, being held accountable. But there are red lines that cannot be crossed. ICE can conduct legitimate deportations, but it can't be masked men roaming the streets, refusing to identify themselves or their authority.
Remember your right to remain silent.
The Trump family cannot be hoovering in money and investments from the countries that depend on us and fear our power and our sanctions. There have to be inspectors general and JAGs and career prosecutors watching to make sure the government is being run on behalf of the people rather than on behalf of the Trump family. Democrats would have to pick a small set of policies that represent the larger set of problems and stick to them. They'd have to choose those policies wisely. They would have to hold the line even when it got tough. And right now, Democrats have not picked those policies. They've not settled on that message. Right now, they are no more prepared for a shutdown than they were in March. There's an ongoing debate inside the party on whether they should talk about Trump's corruption and authoritarianism at all, or instead just say that armed troops in D.C. are a distraction from the price of groceries and healthcare. And look, the reality is that Democrats' best issue is healthcare. Trump has looted Medicaid to pay for tax cuts for him and his friends, and Democrats should never let the voters forget it. But I don't think it's impossible to turn these two realities into one story.
Corruption is why you pay a fortune for prescriptions. Corruption is why your insurance claim keeps getting denied. So Trump promised to attack a broken system. I get it. Ripe target. But here's the thing, he's a crook. And a con man. And he wants to be a king. Yes, the system really is rigged, but Trump's not unrigging it. He's re-rigging it for himself.
I think that argument works. But I am, to be clear, on the side of this debate that says Democrats cannot pretend this is a normal Republican administration and a normal political moment. They cannot ignore masked men in the streets, armed troops in the cities, billions of dollars of money going in the Trump family's pockets, an administration that spins off multiple scandals in a week that would have consumed other presidencies for years. If Democrats cannot make an issue out of all that, then they're screwed, and so are we.
Very well put.
Really, it's called "Don't Act Like This Is Normal." Mm-hmm. Find the latest Ezra Klein. Look for it on YouTube. Send it to your friends. I'm serious. It's the best piece of political advocacy I've seen in years. It's so effective. We just showed you 8 minutes of it. It's 18 minutes long, and it's riveting.
Yeah, even the people who seem powerless can have power. It reminds me of the Irish dissidents who had hunger strikes in prison. That's pretty desperate, right? If that's all you can do. But yet they actually worked. If you saw that movie or read the book, Say Nothing, these two women who were arrested in England for actually trying to commit terrorism, they went on a hunger strike to be sent to an Irish prison, and they won. They got enough attention that they were transferred. So I think this is what Ezra Klein is saying: is we have to create a crisis. We have to bring attention to this. We have to say, with whatever power we have, however limited it is, we are going to stand up and say no. And I would encourage everyone who's listening to or watching this program to contact their congressman or congresswoman, especially if they're Democrats, right? And tell them, I want you to shut down the government. One of the things that's been frustrating about this show for you, for me, and for anyone who listens, and also for the people who don't listen, because that's one of the reasons they don't listen, is they're frustrated, is what the hell can we do about this, right? Just to keep going on and on about how bad it's getting, right, is depressing, right? People want to have something they can do. This is something we can do. And as you know, Democratic representatives tend to have sort of weak spines. I know that in 2019, when we were trying to get them to open an impeachment inquiry into Russia's interference in the election and Trump's collusion with them, that consumed my life at one point. We actually flooded John Sarbanes' office, with protesters, and threatened him, not physically, but we threatened to dog him wherever he went. A threat which we actually did very little to carry out, but it sounded powerful at the time that I said it. Across his conference table, looking like Nancy Pelosi, pointing at him. But the thing is that just getting the Democrats to exercise the power that they have in face of this existential moment is hellishly difficult. So if you guys who are listening actually call your representatives, it might put some iron in their spine. It really could make a difference.
And listen, I had no idea John Ossoff was so good. That was the Senator John. For those of you who are only listening to this, it was John Ossoff referring to Trump as a crook. Really fantastic. There's a good Democratic bench if we ever have a chance to have another national election for president. I think it'll be interesting. And you also found some clips of Dan Rather commenting on this plan, didn't you?
Yeah. So of course, most of you know who Dan Rather is. He's a sort of the heir to Walter Cronkite. The old newsman, right? The old national newsman who everyone trusted. Who was level-headed, right? Who was a centrist, who wasn't extreme. He really picked up on Ezra Klein's message, and on his Substack, I'm only going to show a brief quote, a couple of quotes, but he is endorsing this plan. He is all in on this government shutdown. I just wanted to read what he had to say about it. Time to play hardball. It's risky, but allowing Trump to remain unchecked is worse. Here's hoping you're ready to pay attention, my steady friends. You are about to read some ideas that may seem far-fetched, even radical, especially for Democrats. But the dissolution of our great democracy is happening faster than most rational Americans thought possible. Time to be calm and steady, yes, but also time to think tough and be smart. For many who oppose Donald Trump and his race towards authoritarianism, the lack of a coordinated national effort to counter him has been frustrating, to say the least. We face some tough truths. Democrats have virtually no power. Not none, but not much. Trump holds the White House and both houses of Congress and rules his party with intimidation and actionable threats. The dearth of Republicans willing to stand up to his illegal measures is testament to the fact he also got the Supreme Court eating out of his hand. But Trump is not the all-powerful behemoth he believes himself to be. He is a very unpopular president with an even less popular agenda. 8 months into his second term, no modern president has been as unpopular as Trump, except for Trump the first time around. A majority of the American people don't just dislike his policies. He is underwater on everything from immigration to the economy, but they deeply dislike how he is governing. All this means Trump is vulnerable. If congressional Democrats can find an effective way to fight back, they will have an opportunity in the next couple of weeks. Back in March, Congress passed, with the help of Senate Democrats, a continuing resolution that funded the government for 6 months. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer was vilified by many for his party for capitulating to Trump and getting him the votes he needed. Schumer had his reasons, but 6 months later, those reasons no longer hold water as the September 30th deadline looms. The Republican-controlled Congress has three options: pass a full-year appropriation bill, which is extremely unlikely, pass another continuing resolution for which they would again need the votes of Senate Democrats, or shut down the government. Democrats are once again between a rock and a hard choice: fund Trump's illegal authoritarian regime or stand against it by shutting it down. If they support funding, they will have the leverage to get measures into the continuing resolution that are popular with the American people, such as restoring Medicaid and food assistance funding, curtailing overreach by the Department of Homeland Security, and reinstating due process for starters. But even if those provisions are in the CR, this Congress and this administration has proved that they are not to be trusted to follow the law. Quote, I'm obviously the lone no vote in the Appropriations Committee on these budgets because I don't understand how we can trust that any of the agreements we make are going to be adhered to by an administration that is acting illegally every single day, Senator Chris Murphy said to reporters. If Democrats decide to vote against a new CR, the government will run out of money, causing a shutdown. This is where it gets interesting. Ezra Klein in the New York Times brings a new argument and a new reasoning to this debate. Quote, joining Republicans to fund this government is worse than failing at opposition. It's complicity. If there's a better plan than a shutdown, great. But if the plan is still nothing, then Democrats need new leaders. Klein is someone to whom Democrats in Washington listen. He's finally saying enough is enough. Democrats should not be party to Trump's lawlessness. He says, and the record bears him out, that Trump is corrupting the government the way the mafia corrupts industries. To be effective, Democrats need a plan, one that would have the support of the majority of Americans. So Dan Rather, a pretty level-headed, centrist person, is saying enough is enough. It's time to shut down the government.
Absolutely. And I liked what Klein said, that a shutdown is an attentional event. It's a moment to seize the attention and to insist that they be listened to. And if they can do this with discipline, and they can do this in a very specific, trenchant way, we might get somewhere.
Yeah.
But John, it's worth a try. Anything's worth
It's
a try.
worth a try.
Right?
Anything's worth a try, right? Because doing nothing, as he says, is complicity and weakness, which no one respects.
No one respects. So, John, today I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Andy Borowitz, who very kindly invited me to do an interview spot on his podcast on the Andy Borowitz Substack page, where he has a really excellent series of interviews, if I say so myself, about politics and news of the day and culture. I've been reading Andy since I first started seeing his posts on Facebook around 2006 and read some of the things that he published. And now he's in 2012, I think it's been a while since he's been the New Yorker. And every once in a while, someone forwards me an article of his thinking that it's real because they're so terrific. I did a little bit of reading about his history. There are things about Andy I didn't know. First of all, he graduated from Harvard, where he was the head of the Harvard Lampoon, and also wrote for the Hasty Pudding, which neither of us went to Harvard, but I had friends who did. And the Hasty Pudding is a kind of an extraordinary event that happens once a year that Andy wrote for. I didn't realize that he'd been a television writer.
Yeah,
he'd worked
I didn't either.
For Workin and in Square Pegs, and among many other television credits, he's sort of known for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which I always thought was very, very funny. Now I know why. But in any case, Andy has a really broad perspective on politics, on culture, humor, and how to survive this pretty terrible time we're having in this country politically, culturally, and I'm afraid economically. But maybe he'll distract us for half an hour. So, Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Harry, and nice to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you.
This is reciprocal podcast. We're on each other's podcast, which I mean, that's officially an echo chamber. Talking to each other on each other's podcast, but I'm here for it. So let's just do it.
Well, we do a little bit of political satire here on the show, but the truth is we're really Andy Borowitz wannabes.
That's a sad place to be, my friend.
Well, Andy, I'll ask you a question. You're famous for your brilliant political satire, but has reality itself become such a satire of itself that it becomes a challenge for a satirist?
Yeah, now that has always been the case. Interestingly enough, I get that question sometimes now because our life seems so absurd, and the things coming from Washington especially seem so absurd. But it's always been a problem for satire. If you go back to Jonathan Swift in the 18th century, people thought the his modest proposal, everybody gets signed in high school, people thought that was real. So it's not really a new problem, not as new as one would think. But I think that it's become exacerbated because of the platforms where news and satire commingle, because you have somebody's Twitter feed or X feed, or they're on Blue Sky or Facebook, and they're seeing real news stories by the AP, for example, and then you're seeing stuff that seems like it's mainly lies, like from Fox or Newsmax or something like that. And then you're seeing satire by people like me or The Onion. And so it becomes very hard to know what's real. And Mark Zuckerberg, in his infinite wisdom, decided to institute community notes as a solution. So it truly is the blind leading the blind. People who are confused about reality, fact check. But I wrote about this earlier in the week. There's a website called Snopes, which is dedicated to fact checking. And I feel in a way bad for them because I put them to a lot of work over the years. But in a way I feel that they owe me one because I've actually kept them employed. Because I went into their archives and found that they have like a whole vertical just of my stories. They've had to fact check something like 40 of my stories, many of which, going back a few years, I didn't really remember having written. And they were so absurd. I was coming to them fresh as if I hadn't written them because I had forgotten about them. And I found it so hard to believe that people were confused enough about the reality of these stories to contact Snopes. But apparently, yes, it is a problem. We had a situation last week, which is why I was writing about Snopes, where I kind of revived a column I wrote a year ago for Labor Day, where I had J.D. Vance talking about how the true meaning of Labor Day has been forgotten because Labor Day is meant to be a celebration of women who go through labor. And this is the only thing a woman can do that gives their life any meaning. And he said, for Labor Day picnics, you should only allow women who have reproduced to go to a Labor Day picnic. And the last line was, no baby, no hot dog. And surely this could not be confusing. But no, it sounded every bit as stupid and as pro-Mad as J.D. Vance tends to be. And so that's really the problem, is that I'm now making fun of people or trying to satirize people who are saying such clownish things. And there's nothing harder than trying to improve upon something that's already clownish. I mean, things like Trump wanting to invade Greenland. And I mean, that sounds like something out of South Park.
Yeah, that sounds like an Andy Borowitz article.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like almost like not like satire. It seems like a burlesque or just
right.
That's
what I mean. Reality has become burlesque.
Yeah, so that has been a challenge. And people will say to me, "Oh man, with Trump as president, the jokes just write themselves." And actually, I say no. That just the opposite is true. It's really hard to improve upon what he's doing, and also. I think most people who write satire, as opposed to just like burlesque or parody or whatever, most people who are writing satire actually do kind of have a point to make. And you don't want to just get lost in the silliness of Trump and kind of defang him, because that there's a danger in that. If you make Trump into this lovable, harmless clown, that's actually, you're doing a good job for him. You're doing, that's kind of almost reactionary thing where you're making him.
That's a very good point.
More palatable. So
that's a very good point. I don't watch like the Daily Show that often. I should watch it more often. But I think there's a certain level of patter, that we, whether it's the NPR patter, they're always calm, they're never right. That in some ways kind of normalizes things that are really insane and dangerous. And so I could see that being a danger, that kind of being a little jokey about these things. As my grandmother used to say, it's not a joke.
Yeah. And yet, I think, satire, without getting too serious about it, I think that if you are not hiding the darkness and you're actually really diving into it, and you're talking about the things that he's really doing. Like there's this wonderful editorial cartoonist named Ann Telnis who won.
Oh yes, that's great.
She drew for the Washington Post for many years, and we've become friends and collaborators because she stood up to the Post. She did. She was asked. They actually killed one of her drawings because it made fun of Post owner, newlywed Jeff Bezos, and she decided that, it would have been an incredible act of accommodation and collaboration to have gone along with that. And so she quit, and now she's on Substack along with me. I should clarify that I'm not at the New Yorker anymore. And at Substack, I do have a tremendous amount more latitude and freedom. And I think she's finding the same thing, having left the Washington Post, and Paul Krugman, I think, is finding that, having left the New York Times. It's the mainstream media is playing a big role in, as you would say, the normalization of fascism. And a wonderful book by this historian who actually has been on my show named Ruth Ben-Ghiat called Strongmen. And she analyzed, she pulled together, connected the dots between a number of dictators, including Mussolini is the one that she started with, but she goes through Gaddafi and Putin and Berlusconi, with whom Trump has a great deal in common. And she showed that one thing that ties all of them together is that they all, out of necessity to keep their regimes going, seize control of the media. Well, what we're finding in this country is that there's no need to do so for Trump, because the media is being so obsequious. They're being such techies.
I know.
And trying to do the both sidesy thing. I mean, the New York Times today was really well nigh unreadable because, no offense to those who love Charlie Kirk. I really was, to be honest with you, very unaware of Charlie Kirk because I don't really follow trolls on the left or the right. I find that they're, they've got they've got a good grift going because they're stoking up a lot of outrage and hate. So I was not really a Charlie Kirk watcher, but you would have thought that Nelson Mandela died. I mean, honestly, the way it was being treated in the Times was such respect. America mourns Charlie Kirk. And it's like, no one actually consulted me about whether or not I was mourning. I was actually fairly oblivious to him. But now that I know some things about him, I'm definitely not in mourning. I think, I don't condone political violence, but I certainly don't condone, we shouldn't be celebrating his life either. Let's not celebrate his life or his death. His life was full of spreading hate. And that's the kind of thing I can say because we're on a podcast and this is going to go on YouTube, and theoretically we won't be censored. Maybe we will for the comments I just made. But those aren't comments that you can make if you're working for the New York Times Company or Condé Nast. You probably can't say those things because there's a real goal to bend over backwards to be as palatable as possible, not just to the Trump regime, but to these mythical Trump readers who are somehow going to flock to the New York Times and love Ezra Klein's column. I just don't understand where they think these people are coming from. That suddenly people are going to say, you know what, I'm sick of Alex Jones. I think this Ezra Klein makes a lot of good points. I'm going to start subscribing to the Times. So it's really been a depressing spectacle to watch. But on the other hand, as Ruth Ben-Ghiat points out in her book, the elites tend to bend the knee in a situation like this. There's the desire to be in the club and to appease, and they think that their status will be unaffected by an autocrat if they just go along. And history tells us that that's a fool's errand.
Yeah, it is. And what I've noticed on Joe Scarborough is just guilty of this all the time. Like, when the Democrats come in and, in 2028, who says there's going to be another election, another presidential election? We don't know. He's amassing so much power. And I thought that Ezra Klein's video version of his op-ed this week, I don't act like this is normal, I thought it was really brilliant and effective. And I, was a little surprised that Times was willing to give it so many resources in terms of filming it. I mean, it looks great. And I had this impulse to send it to everybody I know.
Well, that's good. And in fairness to Ezra Klein, I haven't seen that video. I'd like to express my opinions with as little information as possible because I feel like they're going to be purer that way. I don't want to be in any way affected by evidence. So thanks for sharing that. I will check it out. Ezra Klein does a lot of good work. I'm making a larger point about, I think especially the headline writing in the Times, that a lot of times they will sort of do A/B testing of their headlines. And I like the headline that I click on, which is usually something about Trump amassing autocratic power. And then I click on the article and the headline has changed to something like Trump's interference with the Federal Reserve raises eyebrows. They've like taken it way down about 3 degrees. So I can't commend overall what the New York Times and the Washington Post and the LA Times have been doing, but I'm glad to hear that Ezra Klein did something good.
Yeah, no, you're right to point out the headlines. No, I say because, like, for example, as a book author, one of the things I learned is the publishing company owns the title, right? So whatever you put in the book, they're going to change your title because that's the headline of the book. And so I think what we're seeing is there is a disconnect even within these media outlets like the Times and the Post, where the headlines are more outrageous than the articles, which I think is because, right, it's because the headlines are controlled by the corporation, whereas the individual writers, obviously they're still, subject to editorial review and revision, but the headlines are really the corporate facing out visage of the publication. So who was it we had on the other day who was screaming about a Washington Post headline, something like Trump reviews tax bill or something? It was
very benign.
Yeah, something very benign, and it was something, and it was one of his, crazy, autocratic, illegal, unconstitutional actions, and it was like Trump reviews tax bill. I mean, it was something very neutral and normalizing. I'm botching it here, but it's to your point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware the writers do not write the headlines. I mean, I take great care with my headlines because I'm aware that with my jokes, often that's as far as people get. They read the headline. Okay, I see where he's going with this.
Yeah. I thought of an Andy Borowitz type headline last week on the show. Supreme Court lifts stay on murder of firstborn.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah, because that makes sense. That makes sense. They like the Old Testament. They like the Old Testament. I actually was interviewing the comedian John Fugelsang this week because he has a new book out. It turns out he's a real biblical scholar, and he talks a lot about, it's interesting how MAGA tends to harken back to the Old Testament, where there's a lot of baby killing and mass murder and stuff that they like. And then they really avoid a lot of the Jesus stuff because Jesus was preaching love and all of that. So I got kind of a Bible lesson, which was very helpful to me because I've never actually read the Bible. I've heard it's good, but I've never read it, so it was interesting to learn that. But they for all the talk of Jesus and Christianity and Christian nationalism, it's amazing how studiously they avoid the actual teachings of Jesus.
Yeah. I've read it many times, actually. I'm embarrassed to say, and I'm telling you, Jesus is so woke he could not get a job teaching in Texas or Florida for sure.
Well, first of all, he'd have a problem because he's Jewish. And that will, a lot of these institutions, Marjorie Taylor Greene would have a really hard time with him, having him over for brunch, I think. So, he's John actually, and this is his line, not mine, but he calls him an inconvenient radical Jew. And I love that. I sort of relate to that. That's my self-image as well. So
I remember years ago seeing Mort Saul working with an audience, and a young person asked, what should they read? And he said, you should read the Bible. He said, and start with the Old Testament. He said, the New Testament is more like the Warren Report.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that was a good joke. He of course became so obsessed with the Warren Report.
He did.
Kind of really took his career into the tank because he would just get up and talk about his various theories of, who really killed Kennedy, which is not really entertaining, but
was it? No. Yeah, at the end of his life, he started talking about how good Nixon was. It was really very disturbing. But I loved his work though. He was just so terrific. What are you looking at, Andy, in terms of politics? How are you thinking about the present moment? What do you think we should be thinking about?
Well, that's a serious question to ask a comedian, because my stock and trade is making or trying to make people laugh. But I think a couple things. I think it's very helpful to look at history, and that's why a book like Strong Men, which I mentioned by Ruth Ben-Ghiat, is helpful. There's also I talk on my site this week. I talk about this wonderful new book called A Flower Traveled in My Blood, which is all about the Argentinian junta in the 70s and 80s, where they were disappearing people off the street. Does that sound like a familiar thing?
Yes, it does.
Do you think? And there, in that case, actually, it was a group of mothers and grandmothers of the disappeared who stood up to the government. And that kind of thing, actually, I shared that story and I thought, is this going to turn off a lot of my readers? Because again, they're coming here, to use the Mort Saul example, they're coming here to laugh, and do they really want to hear about the dirty war in Argentina? And I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that readers went along with me. I think that people, sometimes it helps, and you as psychologists would be able to understand why probably much better than I. But I think it sometimes helps to zoom out. I think we're so focused on the minute-to-minute drama and psychodrama of Trump, and he wants us to do that because, first of all, to use your terminology, he's a malignant narcissist. So he wants the attention on him at all times. But also, he does this thing which Steve Bannon calls flooding the zone with shit. He just wants us to be rolling with his punches nonstop. So it's like he apparently has said, and this isn't a joke, he's said to his staff, he wants every day to be like an episode of a TV show. And if you look at it, as somebody who comes from television, I can see it, because he changes the subject every day. I mean, the bad news for him is that it turns out like the Epstein thing is turning into like a 9-episode arc. And he would have liked it just to be like one and done, but he's having a hard time putting that one away. But he comes from TV, before that, he comes from the world of tabloid newspapers in New York. And he's very good at distracting people and, coming up with, we're going to invade Belgium. He just comes up with anything off the top. He's very good at making announcements. So that feeds his narcissism, which he needs. He needs that attention, but it also keeps us from focusing on a lot of the bad shit he's doing. So what I tend to urge people not to get caught up in his rhythms, the rhythms that he wants us to be in. I like to zoom out, read about history. And one thing, and I quote this guy, even though he's in some ways was the Charlie Kirk of his time because he was very racist and anti-immigration. But he actually said one thing I agree with, and this is Enoch Powell on the UK, who is a very divisive, racist politician in the 50s, 60s, and beyond. And he observed, I think rather astutely, that all political careers end in failure. And it's a little bit of a sweeping generalization. It's not entirely true, but it is kind of true. And I think we do have to be aware that there will be an aftermath to all of this. This is not going to be our reality forever, but it's a question of how much damage is going to be done in the interim and what can be done to limit that damage. And that's another part of my kind of life coaching, I guess you might say, is that rather than sitting there and scrolling on your phone, which is very toxic activity, which is only going to make you more unhappy and more anxious, actually take action. Find out, like the grandmothers in Argentina, find out what are the groups that represent an issue that you care about and get involved, even if it's not a national issue. I think especially we're ignoring the local things going on just in our backyard, things on our block. Get involved in something where you have contact with other people, because as you guys know, social contact is very important. Don't sit in your room or your bedroom or your kitchen just on your phone looking at the news. And get out there and do something. You'll have contact with other people, which is good for your mental health, and you may actually move the ball a little bit in the right direction. So that's kind of how I look at it. I try not, and it's hard because my work demands that I be in the loop constantly.
Yes. Yeah. We hate that too.
So I think I struggle with that a little bit more than the average person. My wife has chosen to kind of clock out, although she's aware of what's going on.
Mine too.
But I think that's a much healthier choice, because
I know.
I honestly, one thing that having written about the news for 20 years, I actually have come to question the utility of being as aware of the news as we believe we are supposed to be. Because that whole thing of like 24-hour news, and especially now driven by social media and the internet, is such a recent phenomenon. And when I was growing up, we had a morning newspaper and then we had the evening news. And some people would have an afternoon newspaper. Maybe dad would bring that home from work. But that was it. And then, then we had like talk radio, news radio, and that became a thing. So people would start listening to the news, updating every 20 seconds, and then in the 80s, and it's been all downhill since then. We don't really need to have NPR and certainly not CNN on all day, and we don't need to be on our phones all day. I think we need to know enough to know what kind of civic engagement we would benefit from, and our neighborhood or state or country would benefit from, and to know how to vote. But beyond that, I don't know if we really have to need to read like Politico all the time and be like sort of get the inside the beltway scoop. I know that that's valuable to other journalists, and it's certainly valuable to me because I have to write about this shit. But if I were just a normal person, which I wish I were, I don't think I would be consuming as much news as that.
I know. It's really rough watching every new episode of Everybody Hates Donnie.
No, you don't want that. So like read a novel. Like reading a novel is this really get you out of yourself, and
that's true.
Develops your empathy muscle and all that. So that's that's also worthwhile, I think.
Well, I had a question for you. Do you miss writing fiction, like creating characters and writing scripts?
I don't miss script writing because I did that for the first like 15 years of my career, and it's such a collaborative medium, because if you're fortunate enough that your script gets produced, you're then dealing with actors and directors and lighting and the tech people, and they're all wonderfully talented departments to interact with. But I just have a very kind of old-fashioned attitude about what writing is. To me, like I still think of writing as you alone in a room writing something, and it's just between you and the reader. And I understand that like they're genius screenwriters, which I never would pretend to be, but screenwriting is really a visual medium. It's not a literary medium. It's you're creating a blueprint for a director and for actors and for the costume people. And I didn't actually realize that until I sort of got into my career out there. It's like there are those people, those writers who want to become directors, and because they're really visual storytellers. And if anything, I was more like a playwright. I wanted to put things up on stage and have people talk, but I was not into visual spectacle, and I don't think I have like a visual talent the way a great director would. So to me, like being able to write prose, you're creating images that the reader in a very intimate way is translating into like a picture in their minds. I mean, Stephen King talks about that in his book on writing, and it's like telepathy. And I think that is really cool, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy writing something that's that intimate relationship with the reader, where you're sort of speaking in code and the reader is decoding it. And actually writing what I do, my column is, for better or worse, it is fiction. I'm taking these characters that are, they're no different sitcom characters. It's like, instead of having like a drunk character, like in Shakespeare and Falstaff, you have Pete Hegseth, some these kind of comedy archetypes, you have like, the dumb, the dumb opinionated person, and that's like Kristi Noem, so it's like you're doing these types, and Donald Trump is a type, and it reminds me very much of sitcom writing, because you are going back, and a lot of times I'm not really writing about a news peg, I'm not really writing about a news story, I'm just taking these sitcom characters and putting them in a situation.
Right. extrapolating.
So it's a little bit, it's related to what I did before, but I've just eliminated all those people on the set. All the people I was producing TV shows, all the people asking me questions like which wig would be better. Like all those people are now not involved in my daily life. It's just me and my computer and my readers. And that's, by the way, another real luxury of working at Substack. I shouldn't say at Substack. There is no Substack. It's just a software. It's a platform. And I'm just working directly for my readers. And I don't have an editor. And I don't have, I don't even have a photo editor. I have like an account at Getty Images, and I choose the photos. So that whole notion of just being completely the author of what you're doing and interaction, being with your readers, there's just, to me, there's nothing better than that. I love that aspect of what I'm doing now.
Yeah, maybe you can help me explain something that I've observed and really been trying to understand for a long time. There really don't seem to be much of anything in the way of conservative comedians. Why is it that they aren't funny?
Well, I've got to say, I think we're being a little in our silo here, because there are people like Gutfeld, who has like this show on at Fox, which actually does better than Colbert and does better than Jon Stewart. He has a huge audience on Fox. And I mean, Rush Limbaugh, in his way, he was always trying to be funny, but it's like you wouldn't find him funny because of the content of what he was doing, But there are a lot of podcasters out there who are funny to their right-wing audience, and it just if you're a lib snowflake like you, John, it just was impossible for you to decipher because it doesn't come across as comedy. But I mean, mainstream comedy as we know it, like what you'll see on Netflix most of the time or Comedy Central, will tend towards the liberal side of things. But I could also say like the South Park guys, they're all over the map. I mean, a lot of conservatives until recently have really liked South Park because they take a lot of shots at liberals too. So, I know there's this impression that there's no conservative comedy. It's just the way conservatives don't think I'm funny. You don't think that their comedians are funny. That's the nature of America in 2025. We each can choose who we want to be entertained by and find the other thing completely impossible to understand or appreciate.
Well, Andy, I know that you have to go. It's you've got a deadline. I want to urge our viewers and listeners to check out Andy Borowitz on Substack. It's easy to find him. It'll take you right there, and there's so much for you to read and think about. And Andy, what a pleasure to have you on. So much fun.
Well, thank you for being on my show, and it's so great to meet you, John. And keep on shrinking Trump. Just keep doing it.
Thank you. We'll keep working in the echo chamber here with you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Nice to meet you. Oh, what a privilege to have him on.
Yeah, no, he's just terrific and so straightforward and of course ridiculously funny and sharp.
Yeah, right. We are Andy Borowitz wannabes. I think a lot of people would emphasize the wannabes.
I think so, especially when you sing.
Especially when I sing. Now you see, you're not going to see that with conservative comedians. Just saying.
So, John, what time is it?
Well, Harry, I think it's time for shrink wrap. What have we learned this week?
Good question. I did, before we talk about what we learned, John and I wanted to make sure that our audience is aware that there'll be another No Kings March on October 18th. They'll be held in cities around the country. Please make an effort to go to one of them. John and I will be attending whatever's closest, right, John? You might be in DC or Baltimore. I'm upstate, so I may look for other places, but I would love everyone who's listening to put October 18th down on their calendar.
Yeah, put it in your calendars because, look, people have been desperate to know, what can we do? This is something that you can do. So I'm going to try to make an effort, and Harry, please keep me honest on this. Remind me each week just to remind people about October 18th. just to keep it in their minds, right? Keep it in front of mind, and to hector them a little bit, hawk them. October 18th, October 18th, October 18th. It's something we can do.
It's something we can do now, and also write your representatives about instigating a government shutdown and denying the Republicans the votes they need for their budget. As far as what we learned this week, I have to say, things feel more dangerous.
They sure do.
He's ramping up on. He's ramping on all areas, like every place he is provocatively seizing power, including threatening Chicago. Which he's flirting with because he doesn't have quite the authority he had in D.C. I was surprised to see Chris Christie was asked, "What would you do if you were governor?" And Trump threatened to go into Newark or Trenton, and Christie said, "I wouldn't let him. I'd fight him." And the interviewer didn't ask him how, which would have been nice to hear. But clearly, my guess is he's advising Pritzker. I would not be surprised because Christie is would defend the rights of governors to resist an authoritarian president coming up with bullshit reasons for invading blue cities. So I think things are more dangerous, but I also see really a growing movement against him. I really see these terrible poll numbers. His health is declining. His mental functioning is declining. I don't think that this can be kept up indefinitely without a collapse. The Epstein thing is not going away. It's going to keep undermining him. There's going to be a discharge petition signed, and it's all going to come out. And we know there's stuff in those files he doesn't want us to see. He doesn't want his people to see. So I think there are signs of hope, but I'm really feeling the dangerousness of this moment, to be honest with you.
Yeah, my spider senses are tingling with danger as well. And I think the two pieces that I tried to put together in the show that, you might not be obvious that they go together, but they go together, is on one hand, the Supreme Court is taking the safety off the gun. The Supreme Court is saying, have at it. Those masked ICE agents can do whatever they want to whoever they want based on the totality of the circumstances, whatever the heck that means.
Nothing.
Right? It's unleashing. The Supreme Court is unleashing Trump's reign of terror. Okay, this is a reign of terror being unleashed by the government on blue cities. Right, we're going to have troops and masked men. Okay, brutally beating and kidnapping people based on their race, their language, and if they dare to, get in their way or question them. So that's what the Supreme Court did while Trump is moving his troops forward into the blue cities, right? So the Supreme Court is giving him permission to invade these cities in the most Ku Klux Klanish way, to send masked, think about this, we're sending masked men, right, to disrupt Mexican Day parades and family gatherings to celebrate Mexican Independence Day, right? Like the way Hitler sent the brown shirts, right, to break up the political, rallies of the opposition. It's so disturbing that we are rapidly devolving into a police state. And I'm so alarmed that I'm having a little trouble maybe this week holding on to the positive signs that you're talking about. Because, and with the murder and assassination, let's call it an assassination of Charlie Kirk, it's only going to throw more gasoline on this fire.
I know. And It should never have happened. No one should be killed because of their political views, ever. Or thrown in
And
jail.
yet he won't be the last. He won't be the last. Well, now do we go to the funny part? We go to the funny part now.
Anything positive to add? I do. I'm still hopeful. I really believe in the American imagination. I believe in the American instinct for liberty, even though we're also a violent, racist people. We've made the right decisions over time, ultimately. And I think that will happen here too. But I am ending the show by saying that I'm scared. I'm scared of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, Winston Churchill said that Americans always do the right thing after having exhausted all other possibilities. I'm hoping that's true.
I am too. Listen, last week, I think you all know that that John was on assignment. John was hoping to do some undercover work at the Alligator Alcatraz, but he ended up being sent to it was that spa prison with Ghislaine Maxwell. We saw last week. John was her new pickleball partner. So anyway,
they have a nice beach too there at Alligator at that prison.
Texas. Well, I'm glad you had a good time. I mean, you got a tan, which I think is great. But last week, I showed a clip that had been making me happy every day, and I showed this with Ahmed Baba, and it was two girls on Instagram singing a response to Carolyn Levitt lying about Trump's poll numbers. And our exchange went something like this. In this administration, to have the press secretary come out and lie about his poll numbers, I saw this on Instagram and I just couldn't resist showing it because I've watched it almost every day. It makes me laugh. So here are two Instagram singers reacting to Caroline and her press report on Trump's popularity.
According to brand new polling from the Daily Mail, President Trump has never been more popular as his approval ratings are reaching historic highs.
Bitch, what the fuck? 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 What the fuck?
That was my first time watching it all the way through. I know it just kept going. It's great. It's accurate. It's an accurate reaction.
It is. It's Mozart of all things. I think it's Mozart. It's so good. Thank you for indulging me. As I said, I watch it every day.
That's an excellent use of free will for to decide to do that, to use your singing talents for that. I mean, we need this.
We do. If John Gartner's listening, don't let that be an encouragement. Well,
it just so happened that those of us at the prison, at the medium secret prison, we're tanning on the beach and watching Shrinking Trump. So I did see it.
And what I found after the streaming of the episode was this video clip from John from the prison on my phone, and it looks like this.
Fa la la la, fa la la la, fa la 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 la.
Well, that was such a great clip, John. You know, after the show, I was driving away and I looked at my phone and there was a clip from you, and there was that. It really made me laugh. I really appreciate it.
Well, you also said you didn't want me to sing, and that was part of the reason, half the reason I did it.
Well, that's the reason why I said it. But it was You made me laugh, as you always do. So,
well,
yes,
I think we should hear it one more time.
As before we say goodnight. Well, as we say goodnight. Yes. All right, it'll be our closing theme.
Bitch, what the fuck? 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 What the fuck? Bitch.
All right, folks. That's it for Shrinking Trump. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.